The wind screamed through the pines like a dying animal, and I knew we were running out of time. My daughter Emma lay on the cabin floor, her lips turning blue, her breathing shallow and ragged. The avalanche had crushed her left leg 3 hours ago, and I couldn't stop the bleeding. Not really. Not enough. Dad, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling storm outside. I'm so cold. I pressed another torn strip of my flannel shirt against her thigh, watching helplessly as it soaked through with crimson. My radio had died an hour ago. The emergency beacon was buried somewhere under 10 feet of snow. We were 40 miles from the nearest town, and this blizzard had turned the world into a white hell. You're going to be fine, baby. I promise. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. I'm James Whitmore, 52 years old, and I've been a park ranger in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana for 30 years. I've seen men freeze to death. I've pulled bodies from avalanches. I've watched nature take everything from people who thought they could survive her. But Emma was supposed to be different. She was supposed to be safe. 20 years ago, I learned that nature doesn't negotiate. It was during the blizzard of 2005, the one the locals still talk about in hushed voices. I was driving back from a supply run when I saw something in the ditch. At first, I thought it was a bundle of rags. Then I heard the crying. A baby. Maybe 6 months old. Purple-lipped and barely breathing, wrapped in nothing but a thin hospital blanket. No car nearby. No tracks. Nothing. Just this dying child in the middle of nowhere during the worst storm in 50 years. I should have called it in. Should have followed protocol. But she would have been dead in 10 minutes. So I grabbed her, held her against my chest, and drove like hell to St. Patrick's Hospital in Missoula. I kept her warm with my body heat, breathing on her tiny fingers, talking to her the whole way. Telling her she was going to make it. That I wouldn't let her die. She survived. I left her at the emergency room, and by the time I finished the paperwork with the authorities, she'd been taken into state custody. I never learned her name. Never knew what happened to her. Some state official said she'd been adopted by a family in Idaho. That was it. But I remembered her eyes. Even half frozen, even dying, those eyes had looked at me with something I couldn't explain. Something old. Something that saw me. Now, Emma groaned and I snapped back to reality. Her face was wax pale, her forehead slick with fever sweat despite the cold. The cabin's fire was dying, and I had no more wood. I had no more options. I need to get help, I told her, though I knew it was impossible. The storm outside was worse than anything I'd seen in decades. Worse than 2005. The temperature had dropped to 20 below, and the wind was strong enough to knock a man off his feet. Don't leave me, Emma begged, her hand clutching weakly at my wrist. Please, Dad. Don't leave me alone. Tears burned my eyes. Never, sweetheart. I'm right here. But I was lying again. Because in my mind, I was already calculating. How long before she went into shock? How long before the infection took her? How long before I was holding my daughter's corpse? The cabin door rattled violently, and I turned, heart hammering. Nothing could be out there. Nothing human could survive that storm. But the rattling continued, deliberate, rhythmic. Something was trying to get in. I grabbed my rifle from the wall, my hands shaking. Who's there? No answer. Just the wind. And then, through the frosted window, I saw it. A figure. Tall, impossibly tall, with limbs too long and movements too fluid to be human. It stood just beyond the tree-line, watching the cabin. Watching me. My blood turned to ice. I'd heard the stories, the legends the old-timers told around campfires. The Wendigo. The spirit of winter. The creature that hunted in blizzards and fed on human flesh. It was supposed to be a myth. A story to scare tourists. But it was standing there. Real as death. And as I stared, it began to move toward the cabin. The thing outside moved closer, and every instinct screamed at me to run. But where could I go? Emma couldn't walk. I couldn't carry her through this storm. We were trapped. I aimed the rifle at the door, my finger trembling on the trigger. "Stay back," I shouted. "I'm armed." The door stopped rattling. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind of deep, suffocating silence that comes before something terrible. Then a voice spoke. It didn't come from outside. It came from everywhere. From the walls. From the air itself. James Whitmore. My name sounded wrong in that voice. Like ice cracking. Like bones breaking under pressure. "You do not remember me," the voice continued, and now I could see the shadow of the thing pressing against the cabin window. Antlers. Or what looked like antlers. Skeletal fingers that were too long, with too many joints. "But I remember you. What do you want?" My voice cracked. "To pay a debt." The door swung open, and wind and snow exploded into the cabin. I pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullet passed through the figure like it was made of smoke. It stepped inside, and I finally saw it clearly. The Wendigo was a nightmare made flesh. 8 feet tall, with gray skin stretched tight over impossible bones. Its face was almost human, but the eyes were completely black, and its mouth was filled with too many teeth. Antlers sprouted from its skull, adorned with what looked like frozen roses. But there was something else. Something that made me hesitate. Around its neck, it wore a hospital bracelet. Faded and worn, but I could still read the words printed on it. "Baby Doe. February 12, 2005. My hands went numb. The rifle fell from my grip. "You," I whispered. The creature tilted its head, and for a moment, I saw something human flicker in those black eyes. "I was dying," it said. "In the snow. In the cold. You gave me warmth. You gave me life. But you're human. The hospital. They said you were adopted." I was. The Wendigo moved closer, and I flinched, but it didn't attack. I lived. I grew. I became what I was always meant to become. My mother was Salish. She knew what I was. What I would be. That's why she left me to die. She thought the cold would take me before the change. Emma groaned behind me, and the creature's attention shifted to her. "Your daughter. She is dying. Don't touch her." I positioned myself between them, even though I knew it was useless. "I do not wish to harm her," the Wendigo said. "I wish to save her, as you saved me." I couldn't process this. Couldn't understand. How? "There's no way out of here. The storm. The storm is mine." The creature gestured toward the window, and I realized the blizzard had intensified. The wind was howling with a voice that sounded almost like singing. "I called it. I felt your fear. Your desperation. Just as you felt mine, 20 years ago. This is insane. You're a monster." Yes. The Wendigo didn't deny it. Didn't try to justify. "I am hunger. I am winter. I am the price of survival in these mountains. But I am also honor. And I owe you a life." Emma's breathing had become wet and rattling. I turned and saw blood on her lips. Internal bleeding. Oh God, she was drowning in her own blood. "Please," I begged, all pride gone. "Please, if you can help her." "There are 2 ways," the Wendigo said, kneeling beside Emma. Its long fingers hovered over her broken leg. "I can take her to safety. I can move through this storm as easily as you breathe. I can have her in Missoula before dawn. Then do it. Please. But she will remember. She will see me. And she will never be the same." I froze. "What do you mean?" To see the Wendigo is to know winter's truth. To understand that death is always watching. Always waiting. Some minds break from this knowledge. "What's the second way?" I demanded. The creature looked at me with those bottomless black eyes. "I can change her. As I was changed. She will survive. She will heal. But she will no longer be fully human. No. The word came out immediately. Absolutely not. Then choose quickly, the Wendigo said. She has minutes. Not hours. Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked past me, directly at the creature, and she didn't scream. Instead, she smiled. I see it, she whispered. I see the snow angel. My heart shattered. Snow angel, Emma repeated, her voice dreamy, distant. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. So beautiful. The Wendigo's expression changed, softened, if such a thing was possible. She is already crossing, it said quietly. Her mind is leaving. The pain is too great. No, no, no. I grabbed Emma's face, forcing her to look at me. Stay with me, baby. Stay with me. But her eyes were glazed, unfocused. She was slipping away, and I was powerless to stop it. I will take her, the Wendigo said, and there was something in its voice that might have been compassion. I will carry her through the storm. But you must understand, James Whitmore, when she wakes, she will remember me. She will carry that memory forever. It will change her. I don't care, I said desperately. Let it change her. Let her live. The creature reached down and lifted Emma with impossible gentleness, cradling her against its skeletal chest. She looked so small in its arms. So fragile. There is more you must know, it said. About that night. About what you saved. I don't care about that either. Just save her. Please. You deserve the truth. The Wendigo's black eyes fixed on me. My mother left me in the snow because the elders told her I was cursed. They saw the signs. The hunger. The cold that never left my skin. In our tradition, children born with the Wendigo spirit must be returned to the winter before the change completes. It is mercy. Mercy. I spat the word. Leaving a baby to freeze to death? Yes, it said simply. Because what I became is worse than death. I have killed, James Whitmore. I have hunted. I have fed. The hunger is constant, burning, endless. I fight it every day, every hour. And sometimes, I lose. I felt sick. Then why did I save you? Why did you survive? Because you gave me a choice. The Wendigo looked down at Emma. You showed me that survival can be a gift, not a curse. That life, even a life like mine, has value. You didn't know what I was. You just knew I was dying. And you refused to let that happen. The wind outside screamed louder, and I realized the creature was preparing to leave. Wait, I said. How do I know you'll really save her? How do I know you won't? Feed. The Wendigo's teeth showed in what might have been a smile. I could have taken you both already. I could have satisfied the hunger. But I am not only hunger. I am also the child you warmed with your breath. The infant you held against your heart. That child still exists. Inside this. It gestured to its monstrous form. And she remembers kindness. She. I whispered. My name was Sarah. Before the change. My adoptive family named me Sarah. The creature's voice wavered, became more human for just a moment. I lived as Sarah for 17 years. I went to school. I had friends. I was normal. And then, one winter, the hunger came. And everything I was became everything I am. What happened to your family? I left before I could hurt them. Sarah's, the Wendigo's, voice hardened. I walked into the mountains. And I never went back. Emma coughed, a wet, horrible sound, and Sarah tightened her hold. We are out of time. When I return her, do not ask her what she saw. Do not force her to speak of this night. Let her remember in her own time, in her own way. Will I see you again? I don't know why I asked. Maybe because, despite everything, I felt connected to this creature. This thing I'd saved. Perhaps, Sarah said. The mountains are my home. And debts, once paid, sometimes leave echoes. She moved toward the door, and the storm parted before her like a living thing. One more thing, James Whitmore. Thank you for choosing life. Even when it was foolish. Even when it was wrong. Thank you. And then she was gone, disappearing into the blizzard with my daughter in her arms. I collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by Emma's blood, and wept. Because I didn't know if I'd just saved my daughter or condemned her. I didn't know if the creature that had been Sarah would keep its promise. I didn't know anything except that I was alone in a freezing cabin, and the choice I'd made 20 years ago had finally come back to demand its price. The fire died. The storm raged. And I waited. They found me 36 hours later. A search and rescue team, fighting through the aftermath of the blizzard that had been the worst in Montana's recorded history. I was barely conscious, hypothermic, delirious. They said I kept asking about my daughter. Kept screaming her name. Emma was already at St. Patrick's Hospital. She'd been found on the emergency room steps at dawn the morning after the storm, wrapped in my jacket, her legs set and splinted with what the doctors called impossible precision. No frostbite. No infection. Stable vitals. The trauma surgeon told me it was a miracle. Someone knew exactly what they were doing, he said, examining the splint. This is better than most paramedics could manage in a hospital, let alone in a blizzard. I didn't tell him who that someone was. Emma recovered faster than anyone expected. Within a week, she was walking with crutches. Within a month, she was hiking again. The doctors called it remarkable. I called it a debt paid. But Emma was different now. She was quieter. More thoughtful. She spent hours staring out windows at the snow. And sometimes, late at night, I'd find her standing outside in the cold, her breath misting in the air, her eyes searching the treeline. Do you remember? I asked her once, 3 months after the avalanche. She didn't turn to look at me. I remember beauty, she said softly. I remember being carried by something ancient. Something that shouldn't exist but does. I remember antlers and ice and eyes like midnight. And I remember feeling safe. Are you afraid? No. Emma finally looked at me, and I saw something new in her eyes. Something wise beyond her years. I'm grateful. Whatever it was, it could have let me die. But it didn't. Because you didn't. 20 years ago. I told her the story. About the baby in the snow. About Sarah. She'd listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she'd just nodded, like it all made perfect sense. Do you think she's still out there? Emma asked. Do you think she's still fighting the hunger? I hope so, I said. I hope saving you helped. I hope it reminded her of what you told me, that she's not only hunger. She's also the child who was saved. Emma smiled. I want to help people like her, she said suddenly. People who are caught between worlds. Who are trying to be good despite what they are. Is that crazy? No, I said, putting my arm around her shoulders. It's brave. Like your old man. She laughed, and the sound was warm and alive and human. My daughter. Still here. Still mine. A year passed. Then, another. Emma went to college, studying anthropology and Native American folklore. She said she wanted to understand the stories. The legends. The truth behind the myths. I supported her, even though I knew what she was really searching for. She was searching for Sarah. And then, on a February night, the 20th anniversary of the day I found a dying baby in the snow, there was a knock on my cabin door. I opened it, and she was there. The Wendigo. But different. Smaller. Less monstrous. She wore human clothes, a heavy coat, boots, a knit cap pulled over where the antlers had been. Her face was almost normal, though her eyes were still too dark, too deep. Sarah, I said, and my voice broke on her name. James. She smiled, and it was a real smile. warm, human. I wanted you to know. The hunger is still there. It will always be there. But it's quieter now. Because I remember what you taught me. That survival can be a gift. Emma wants to meet you, I said. Properly, I mean. She's been studying. I know. Sarah laughed softly. I've been watching over her. From a distance. Making sure she's safe. Old habits. Thank you, I said. For saving her. For keeping your promise. Thank you, Sarah replied. For saving me first. For showing me that monsters can choose to be more than their hunger. She started to turn away, back toward the dark forest, but I stopped her. Will you come back? Emma would. We'd both like to see you again. Sarah looked at me for a long moment, and in her eyes, I saw the baby I'd pulled from the snow. The child who'd looked at me with ancient wisdom. The girl named Sarah who'd fought to stay human. And the creature who'd paid her debt with honor. Perhaps, she said, the mountains are my home. And debts, once paid, sometimes leave echoes. She disappeared into the night, and I stood in the doorway, watching the snow fall. Thinking about choices and consequences. About the lives we save and the ways they save us back. Emma came home for the weekend the next day. We went hiking in the mountains, and at one point, we saw tracks in the snow. Large. Inhuman. Leading deeper into the wilderness. Emma smiled and touched the tracks gently. Thank you, she whispered to the forest. For everything. And somewhere in the distance, I could have sworn I heard a voice on the wind, ancient and young at the same time, answering, You're welcome. The debt was paid. But the story, our story, would never really end. Because some bonds transcend humanity. Some promises echo forever. And some acts of kindness create debts that span decades, bridging the gap between man and monster, reminding us all that salvation can come from the most unexpected places. Even from the hunger and the cold. Even from the Wendigo in the snow.